think I'm playing, huh?
Okay.
You think I'm playing, huh? Hit you with this big 4-5 hollow tips, gonna eat your up.
In the late hours of November 19, 2019, Warren police would respond to a disturbing call on a quiet street just outside Detroit. What they uncovered was a scene that would haunt the community for a long time: the lifeless body of 20-year-old India Mackey inside a van. But what no one realized in that moment was something far more disturbing. Her boyfriend, 18-year-old Kevin Dixon, had not only taken her life inside that van, he had continued driving with her body for hours as if nothing had happened. The most chilling part? India had recorded it all. On her own phone, she captured Kevin loading a gun, wiping away fingerprints, and threatening her. She didn't know those would be the final images of her life. That video became her last act of courage and the evidence that would change everything. Because what happened next would unravel a story of betrayal, violence, and even maybe justice. Now let's go back and understand who India was and how her life led up to that gruesome day. India Elise Mackey was a young woman who had just turned 20 years old. She had recently celebrated her birthday with happiness, surrounded by people who loved her.
It's my birthday. It's my birthday. Ivy said she gonna take him home. Cuz. She said that'd be backwards. It's my birthday. It's my birthday. Yes. All of that. Yes. Okay, this way.
There was laughter, food, and joy. It felt like the start of a bright new chapter in her life. Little did she know that danger was already waiting to turn that joy into a tragedy. Friends and family remembered her smile that day, the way she carried herself with excitement about the future. If only she knew that joy around her birthday would soon be replaced by something devastating. India lived in Warren, Michigan, a city near Detroit. She grew up in a big family where the house was always full of voices, laughter, and the closeness of siblings. She had many brothers and sisters, and she was one of the people everyone in her home loved deeply. Her parents, Sabrina and James Paul, always tried to support her and guide her as she grew up, teaching her values of kindness and respect. Family was at the center of India's world, and she carried that love with her wherever she went. Sadly, she would soon learn that sometimes the greatest danger comes from those closest to us. India was known as someone very kind. She smiled often. She was gentle with people. She tried to help others when she could, even if she didn't have much herself. Friends around her said she had a warm heart. She could walk into a room and make it feel calmer just by being there. Friends described her as someone who listened without judgment, who gave comfort when others were hurting, and who always seemed to bring peace into stressful moments. Just like many young people, India had a dream. She was trying to figure out her life. India had attended Saginaw High School, and after graduation, she stepped into adulthood, determined to build her own path forward. She dreamed of a career, of independence, of creating a life filled with love and opportunity. But those dreams and possibilities would soon be interrupted by someone who would ruin her life in ways she never thought was possible. India was in a relationship with 18-year-old Kevin Dixon. The two had been living together for a few months. At first, their relationship may have looked normal from the outside. They shared a home, spent time together, and seemed like a young couple trying to build a life. But people close to them later said things were not always peaceful between them. There was a lot of arguing and tension. Some people noticed controlling behavior and emotional stress in the relationship. Friends recalled moments when India seemed worried or quiet after disagreements. Still, she stayed close to him, perhaps hoping things would improve or believing that love could overcome the problems. Like many young couples, they tried to make things work. However, even with those issues, no one around her expected anything truly dangerous. Not like this. Not so suddenly. The day before the tragedy, India had just celebrated her 20th birthday. It was supposed to be a happy moment, a fresh start, a new age of life. She had enjoyed time with loved ones, smiling and looking forward to what adulthood might bring. After the celebration, she continued her normal routine. Like any young woman, she was trying to live her everyday life. She went to work, spent time at home, and carried on with the rhythm of her days. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But everything changed very quickly after that. On November 19, 2019, India was at a home in Warren, Michigan, in the area near 10 Mile and Hayes. She had just returned from work. Her boyfriend, Kevin Dixon, was home. At some point during the day, something went wrong between them. At around 5:30 p.m., India was sitting in the driver's seat of her van, caught in a heated argument with Kevin. No one knows every detail of what started the argument, but what is known is that it became intense. The situation in the room grew heavy. Voices were raised, emotions were high. What began as a disagreement grew into something heavier.
You think I'm playing, huh?
Okay.
You think I'm playing, huh? Hit you with this big 4-5 hollow tips, gonna eat your up.
Those angry, hate-filled words and despicable actions from her boyfriend.
And India, feeling worried about what was happening, began recording on her phone. She started filming Kevin. What she didn't know was that she would end up recording her final moments. In the video, Kevin Dixon can be seen holding a gun, sitting close to India. The atmosphere is tense and uncomfortable. What was more chilling was that he began loading the gun, an act that happens when one is preparing to use the weapon. A weapon he later claimed was for self-protection, but the intent would be more terrifying. From the captured video, it was clear India wasn't a threat to Kevin. She was unarmed, seated, and calm, yet the danger was rising right in front of her. Then something even more disturbing happens.
The idea that he's pulling the bullet out, wiping his fingerprints off, showing it to her, and
It chills you to the bone, says Macomb County Prosecuting Attorney Eric Smith, and I agree.
Kevin starts wiping the bullets with a brown paper towel. He's carefully trying to remove fingerprints from them. It's slow, deliberate, controlled. This didn't look like the behavior of someone who said he was trying to defend himself. It showed planning, a chilling awareness of what he was about to do. Not random, not accidental. It was the kind of act that revealed intent, not fear. But India kept recording. She stays in the moment, even though the situation is clearly dangerous. Her courage in holding the phone up showed she wanted proof, perhaps hoping the video would protect her or tell her story if things went wrong. Kevin continues talking in a cold and calm tone.
Okay.
You think I'm playing, huh? Hit you with this big 4-5 hollow tips, gonna eat your up.
At one point, he warns her while still holding the weapon and the bullets. His words carried threat, not protection. India responds quietly. She says simple words like, "Okay," trying not to escalate the situation. Her voice is soft, careful, showing she was trying to calm him down. But the air between them keeps getting heavier. Then, Kevin asks why she is recording him. India is still holding her phone up, capturing everything. She does not stop, even though she knows he's watching her every move. What started as an argument between them is about to turn to something far more horrifying. And then, in a moment that changes everything, Kevin makes a decision that cannot be undone. Kevin Dixon raises the gun at close range, and he fires at India. The shot hits her in the side of her body. In an instant, everything changes. But Kevin wasn't done. After the shooting, he moves India's lifeless body from the driver's seat to the passenger seat of the van. The act is cold and calculated, showing no concern for the young woman he had just harmed. Kevin then gets into the van, and he drives away. The van leaves the area with India inside, while people nearby begin to realize something terrible has just happened. India Mackey's life has just been taken in a violent act inside a van by the person she trusted and recorded just moments before. Meanwhile, the van kept driving away. Inside, India was still inside the vehicle, and people outside did not yet fully understand how serious things were. But very quickly the first 911 calls started coming in. Someone nearby had heard the sound of a gunshot. Others saw the van drive away in a strange and fast way. Something about it did not feel right. Witnesses immediately called 911. They told the dispatcher that something dangerous had just happened. Within minutes, the Warren Police Department arrived at the scene. Officers were told that a young woman had been shot and that the person responsible had left the area in a van. This was now an emergency. Police cars began moving through the streets quickly. Officers spread out across nearby roads, trying to find the vehicle before it could go too far. The city was now on alert. However, Kevin Dixon was still driving. He was trying to leave the area, moving through nearby streets. But the police response was fast. Officers spotted a van matching the description of the same van Kevin was driving. The driver was driving erratically near East Point. Officers pulled the vehicle over, but nothing prepared them for what they were about to find. Inside the passenger area was the lifeless body of India Mackey. Emergency medical help was called right away. Paramedics rushed to the scene and tried to help her. They worked quickly and carefully, doing everything they could, but it was already too late. But India's injuries were too serious. Despite all emergency efforts, she could not be saved. She had died from the gunshot wound she suffered just minutes earlier. The scene became quiet and heavy. What started as a search for a suspect had now turned into a confirmed loss of life. Kevin Dixon was taken out of the van by police. He was only 18 years old. Officers arrested him at the scene. He was handcuffed and placed into police custody. The van was examined carefully. Officers looked for evidence inside and around the vehicle. They were trying to understand exactly what happened inside those final moments. As police continued their investigation, they also began learning something more troubling. After killing India, Kevin used her phone to call his mother. He told her that he had shot India and he needed help to hide the weapon he had used. However, Kevin didn't stop there. He also contacted one of India's acquaintances. In his distorted retelling of what had happened, he claimed India had been playing recklessly with a gun, insisting he had warned her repeatedly before it went off and ended her life. But his story didn't match what others witnessed. During questioning of the witnesses, one neighbor told police that after hearing the gunshot and seeing a white van speed away, he noticed a Chevrolet arrive. He saw a woman step out, picked up a coat lying on the ground, then switched vehicles with someone driving a Jeep. Both fled in opposite directions. But the case was far from over. Police still needed to complete their investigation. They still needed to gather all evidence and prepare for court. And they still needed to understand the full truth of what happened inside that van on that day. But there was one problem. No one could find the weapon. Investigators believed the firearm had been hidden inside that coat that was picked up. Evidence pointed to Kevin's mother as the one who retrieved it before officers could recover it. When questioned, she admitted to interfering with the investigation in an effort to shield her son. Kevin Dixon was officially arrested and charged in connection with India Mackey's death. He pled guilty to possession of a firearm while committing a felony. This was not a random act. It was a domestic situation that had turned deadly in a very short amount of time. For India's family, the news was devastating.
They had just endured the unbearable loss of someone they cherished, only to be confronted with the painful truth of what had really happened to her. The shock rippled through the community, leaving many struggling to comprehend how India's life could end so tragically and at the hands of someone she had once trusted and loved. After Kevin Dixon's arrest, his case moved through the courts in Macomb County, Michigan. He was charged with first-degree homicide, carrying a concealed weapon, and felony firearm possession. During the pre-trial hearings, prosecutors introduced the disturbing video clips India had recorded herself moments before she died. In it, Kevin could be seen loading the firearm, wiping away fingerprints, and issuing threats, evidence that became central to the case. Neighbors and other witnesses also testified, recounting what they saw in the moments leading up to the shooting. However, in the courtroom, Kevin attempted to downplay his role. He argued that he never meant to kill India and even asked to be released so he could start a new job. But the judge and prosecutors pointed to the video, the witness accounts, and his immediate efforts to hide the weapon as proof that the crime was not accidental, it was deliberate and premeditated. Not only that, Kevin showed no remorse for what he did. The defense attempted to negotiate a plea, arguing for a lesser charge like manslaughter, citing potential arguments about the heated nature of the argument or Kevin's age. However, prosecutors emphasized that the shooting was deliberate and pointed to the video India recorded as undeniable proof of Kevin's intent, showing that India was calm, unarmed, and never a danger to him. They argued that the community needed to see accountability so that such violence would not be excused or minimized. However, Kevin Dixon agreed to a plea deal. The first-degree homicide charge, which could have carried life without parole, was dismissed. In exchange, he pled guilty to second-degree homicide. This agreement ensured a long prison sentence while avoiding the uncertainties of a full trial. The plea deal was controversial to some because it meant Kevin avoided the harshest possible punishment, but it also guaranteed that he would spend decades behind bars. 18-year-old Kevin Dixon was sentenced to 20 to 35 years in prison. This sentence reflected the gravity of his actions while recognizing the plea agreement. The judge explained that the punishment was meant to protect society, honor India's memory, and show that deliberate violence would not be tolerated. Meanwhile, Kevin's mother, who had previously tampered with evidence, was charged with accessory after the fact and tampering with evidence. She was taken into custody during Kevin's arraignment in November, but ultimately avoided prison, paying a $2,300 fine in exchange for cooperation. Though nothing could ever bring India back, the trial and sentencing underscored the strength of the justice system. Evidence, witness testimony, and determined police work all came together to hold Kevin Dixon accountable. His punishment ensures he will spend much of his life behind bars, preventing further harm and forcing him to face the consequences of India's death. For her family and community, however, the outcome could not erase the grief. India was more than a daughter or a friend. She was a source of guidance, a radiant presence in the lives she touched. Known for her generosity, she consistently placed the needs of others before her own, leaving behind a legacy of love and selflessness. On April 18th, India's sister, Isis, brought people together at Saginaw High School, the place where India had once studied and graduated. That evening, the community gathered for a candlelight vigil in her honor. Friends, relatives, and neighbors shared cherished memories, lit candles at the altar, and released balloons into the night sky. Yet the vigil was more than a symbolic gesture. It became a powerful expression of grief, love, and remembrance. India's mother, Sabrina, spoke with deep emotion, overwhelmed by the support surrounding her. Her parents also voiced their hope that India's story would serve as a wake-up call, urging the community to confront the growing problem of domestic abuse in Warren. They called for unity, awareness, and change, reminding everyone that this tragedy was part of a larger issue that demanded action. India's father, James Paul, also spoke candidly about the ordeal. He shared that he had done everything he could to shield his daughter from Kevin, yet as a parent who valued her independence, there were limits to how far he could intervene. His words carried both the weight of a father's love and the anguish of watching his child remain in a relationship marked with troubling signs. In fact, India Mackey's death marked the 6th case of domestic violence of this nature in Macomb County between September and November of 2019. The alarming statistics pushed detectives to gather every possible detail about the case. The death of India Mackey serves as a tragic reminder of the dangers of domestic abuse and the devastating impact of intimate partner violence. It was a violent, preventable act that cut short a young life filled with promise, love, and kindness.
my daughter and my 2 grandchildren to something that I never imagined would happen. So heartbreaking because she's only 1 and she's not going to remember a lot, but I'm going to make sure that she's steeped in family.
On March 5, 2021, the police received a 911 call for a welfare check in the calm of a St. Louis neighborhood. But as they entered the house, they were met with a horrifying scene. 34-year-old Roseanne and 2 of her children were found shot dead inside their home, while her youngest child was missing. And her husband, the same man she had just married, was nowhere to be found. As detectives launched a desperate manhunt, what they uncovered revealed a chilling pattern of abuse, ignored warnings, and a final act of violence that no one saw coming until it was far too late. This is the life and death of Roseanne McCulley, a devoted mother of 3, and her 2 children, Caden Johnson and Kaylee Brooks.
Ooh, Dapper, you just gonna lick yourself while you're on my shoulder? Hey, I didn't have a bath. You did. Don't lick me. Dapper.
Roseanne McCulley, known to those who loved her as Rosie, was a bright light in the lives of everyone she met. She was born and raised in Missouri, and from a young age, it was clear she was meant to create. Rosie's creativity knew no bounds. Whether it was with a paintbrush, a sewing machine, or a cake pan, she could turn the ordinary into something extraordinary. Her creativity was her voice, her therapy, and her legacy. She attended the University of Missouri St. Louis and graduated in 2018 with a Bachelor of Arts in Communications. It was the perfect field for her, as Rosie had a way of connecting with people that made them feel seen and valued. But her true passion was building her own businesses, something she took great pride in. Rosie was the founder of Glitter on the 8th, a custom design shop that specialized in hand-decorated shoes, tumblers, and other keepsakes. She also owned Creative Sweets, a home bakery known for its vibrant cakes. She had even made her own wedding cake, a symbol of her talent and determination. Rosie's days were busy but full. She juggled motherhood and entrepreneurship with grace and humor. She was a mother to 3 beautiful children, Caden, 13, who was respectful and quiet but fiercely protective of his siblings, Kaylee, 6, a bubbly little girl who loved to dance and laugh, and a 1-year-old daughter who had just begun exploring the world. Everything Rosie did was for them. Every sale, every late night decorating cakes, every social media post, her children were the driving force behind it all.
Say hey, Google. Say Google. Tell Google. We're talking about Google. We don't care about that right now. Take Google. Tell Google what you want, baby. Tell it, baby. Yeah, baby. Get it. Get it, Pooh. Shake it. You finished? No? Okay. Get to it, Pooh.
But behind the perfectly crafted images and glowing reviews, Rosie was living in fear. Her relationship with Bobby McCulley, the father of her youngest child and her husband since 2018, was not the fairy tale many imagined.
He's tackled just inside the 30 and a tie-out tackle. Thomas and Clark collaborate.
The two had been together for years before getting married, and in the early days, things may have seemed hopeful. But the reality behind closed doors was far more troubling. Court records showed a long history of domestic abuse. In 2017, Rosie filed a domestic violence complaint against Bobby, but like many abuse survivors, she chose not to press charges. The case was dismissed, and the cycle of abuse continued. After their wedding, the violence escalated. Bobby's temper flared easily. Neighbors said they heard shouting coming from the McCulley home almost every other night. Crashes, yelling, crying, it became a grim soundtrack in the neighborhood. Rosie, always trying to protect her children, tried to make it work. She hoped things would change, but they didn't. Her social media became a lifeline, a place where she could speak the truth, even if just in small glimpses. She shared posts that hinted at her pain, posts that described terrifying nights and unhealed wounds. Just days before her death, she revealed that she had been hospitalized. Her injuries were severe. Bobby had allegedly stomped on her chest and abdomen. The CT scans showed no internal bleeding, but the muscle damage and bruising were extensive. She had been sent home with morphine and other medications to manage the pain. She was transparent about her shame, about how she tried to hide the bruises, how she blamed herself. But most heartbreaking of all was her desire to still believe things could get better. That maybe, just maybe, if she held on a little longer, something would change. Instead of showing any remorse, Bobby responded to her post with a cruel and ominous message, making it clear he felt no shame and even hinted that worse was yet to come. It was a message that left those who saw it deeply unsettled, not only because of its cruelty, but because it seemed to reveal something far more sinister. Between January and February of 2021, Rosie made multiple calls to the police. These weren't casual disputes. They were calls of desperation, domestic violence, threats, fear.
According to police records, multiple calls from the McCauley home were made in the last couple of weeks, one of them for domestic violence.
And yet, despite all of it, Bobby remained free. Rosie was never offered the protection she needed. Instead, she took matters into her own hands. She kicked Bobby out of the house. She began the process of divorcing him. She even posted online asking for help moving his belongings out. Her followers, her friends, rallied around her. They believed she was on her way to something better. But danger doesn't always disappear when you leave. Sometimes it follows you. Sometimes it waits. On the night of March 5th, around 8:30 p.m., a neighbor saw Bobby sneaking into Rosie's home. Alarmed, they called the police. Officers arrived, knocked on the door, looked around. But they didn't see any immediate signs of trouble. So they left. It was a decision that would haunt many. What happened next would leave the entire community reeling. Bobby waited until the house was quiet. Then, behind closed doors, he confronted Rosie and her children. It's believed he held them hostage for hours, a period of time no one can fully account for. Whether there were arguments, pleading, moments of silence, we can only imagine. What we do know is that in those hours, 3 lives came to an end. Around midnight, a neighbor was awakened by a series of unsettling noises coming from Rosie's house. The shouting and screaming were unmistakable, followed by a loud bang that reverberated through the quiet street. Moments later, the lights in the house flickered oddly, brief flashes that seemed to hint at distress. Alarmed by the eerie silence that followed, the neighbor tried to call Rosie, dialing twice and hoping she would answer. When both attempts went unanswered, concern turned to certainty that something was terribly wrong, and they called 911 again. This time, the police didn't wait. They entered the home from the back, weapons drawn, announcing their presence. When no one responded, they forced the door open. What they found inside was nothing short of a nightmare. Just beyond the entrance were the bodies of Roseanne McCauley, her son Caden Johnson, and her daughter Kaylee Brooks. Each had been shot. The scene was chaotic, furniture overturned, items strewn about, signs of a struggle evident in every corner. And then there was silence. Bobby and the 1-year-old child were missing. And so began a desperate search. A citywide manhunt. A race against time, not just to find the suspect, but to find an innocent child who might still be in danger.
We start with a tragic story out of North St. Louis County where a mother and her 2 children were shot and killed inside their home. The victims, Roseanne McCauley and her 2 kids, 13-year-old Caden Johnson and 6-year-old Kaylee Brooks. The suspect was identified as Bobby McCauley III, the mother's estranged husband. Police also say he took their 1-year-old child.
Police quickly issued an Amber Alert for the missing 1-year-old child. This alert, a desperate call to the public, was blasted across social media, TV stations, highway billboards, every possible outlet. Law enforcement feared the child was with Bobby and time was of the essence. Details about the vehicle, a silver Dodge Charger, were released along with photos of Bobby. Authorities made it clear they believed he was armed and dangerous and the child's life could be at risk. But just a few hours later, a miracle emerged from the darkness. Around 3:30 a.m., the child was safely dropped off at a relative's home in North St. Louis. Someone from the family contacted the police and officers rushed to retrieve the little girl. She was checked at a local hospital and, to everyone's relief, found to be physically unharmed. The sigh of relief was real, but it was brief. Now, the focus turned entirely to Bobby. A manhunt swept through the city. Officers worked around the clock, tracking down every possible lead, speaking with family members, tracing phone records, and analyzing surveillance footage. They contacted Bobby's mother, Michelle Clayton, hoping she could help them find him. But according to authorities, she wasn't cooperative. She claimed not to know his whereabouts, something the police quickly began to doubt. Then came a break in the case. Surveillance cameras caught Bobby's vehicle near Goodfellow Boulevard and Natural Bridge Avenue, close to the city-county line. From there, they traced his car to the old North St. Louis neighborhood, where they located it parked on the 1300 block of Clinton Street. Inside that vehicle, police found Bobby. But instead of surrendering, Bobby took his own life before officers could reach him. His body was discovered with a self-inflicted gunshot wound. He was pronounced dead at the scene. There would be no trial, no confessions, no apologies.
Police say it didn't take long for them to realize that 35-year-old Bobby McCauley III, the victim's estranged husband, is a suspect. The child was found with a loved one around 3:30 in the morning in North St. Louis. The suspect found in the area as well, in a car where he killed himself as officers tried to make the arrest. Police say McCauley had a history of run-ins with the law dating back to 2008. More recently, the alleged suspect and victim had a domestic dispute in 2017, but no charges were pressed. The suspect had recently filed for divorce at the end of February, and police most recently were actively looking for him for a prior domestic incident. Sadly, they didn't find McCauley in time.
The person responsible for such unimaginable violence had chosen to escape the consequences, leaving behind even more pain for those who survived him. The location of his death raised eyebrows. His car had been found near his mother's residence, fueling suspicions that she had been shielding him from law enforcement. Authorities later arrested Michelle Clayton and charged her with hindering prosecution. She faced a felony charge for allegedly lying about her son's whereabouts during the critical hours of the manhunt.
McCauley later took his own life when police tried to arrest him. Another woman, Michelle Clayton, is facing charges in this case. A probable cause statement says she misled and lied to police, preventing McCauley's arrest.
Her bond was set at $25,000. This revelation angered an already grieving community. Many couldn't understand how a mother, herself a grandmother to the murdered children, could protect someone who had committed such brutality. It deepened the tragedy and stirred a deeper public conversation about the cycles of violence, denial, and silence that too often accompany domestic abuse. And that's what this case became, more than just a crime. It became a symbol of how systems can fail and how dangerous it is when red flags are ignored. Rosie had called the police multiple times in the weeks before her death. Her neighbors had heard the abuse. Her social media posts revealed a pattern of escalating violence. Still, no one stepped in with the urgency that was needed. Rosie tried to leave. She sought help, but the response was insufficient. The system failed her and her children in the most irreversible way. In the days that followed the murders, the community came together in mourning. Vigils were held. Purple balloons, often used to symbolize the fight against domestic violence, filled the sky as people gathered to honor Rosie, Caden, and Kaylee. There were tears, prayers, and quiet moments of reflection. People left candles, flowers, and handmade signs in front of Rosie's home. Friends and strangers alike came forward to share how Rosie had touched their lives through her art, her warmth, and her resilience.
Very beautiful young lady. The kids were very manable.
Neighbors say they last saw the mom watching her kids play outside their home on Wednesday. A bouquet of flowers now sits here in memory of the family.
I've been trying all, I ain't even been asleep. I was trying to get to sleep, I'm devastated.
My prayers, my family prayers go out to the family. I hate this even happened to the family.
Rosie's close friend, Stephanie, was one of the last people to speak with her before the tragedy. She recounted how Rosie had finally begun to talk openly about the abuse, especially after a severe beating that left her hospitalized. Stephanie had urged her to get out, to find shelter, to seek protection. Rosie had hesitated, not because she didn't want safety, but because she feared for her children. That fear, as it turned out, had been heartbreakingly justified.
A friend believes that she was the last person to speak to Rosie alive.
She last talked to Rosie around 6:30, but planned to check in regularly.
And I'm calling. She didn't answer, and I sent her a text message.
Around 10:30, St. John texted, "Answer me." The response was, "Busy, I will hit you back shortly." St. John wrote, "Girl, I was about to beat these streets," but then she realized that wasn't a normal response from Rosie. She wrote, "Bobby, let my niece go." There was no response. At the time, he may have still been in the house after killing Rosie and her 13-year-old son and 6-year-old daughter.
The community wasn't just grieving. They were angry, and that anger turned into action. Just days after the tragedy, activists organized a rally for Rosie outside the St. Louis County Justice Center. The purpose wasn't just to honor Rosie and her children, it was to demand change.
People gathered today in Clayton to recognize the lives lost of a mother and her 2 children. They're calling for a stop to domestic violence and letting people know why it's important to speak up to prevent more tragic events like this from happening. News 11's Ty Hawkins spoke to the mother of Rose Ann McCauley, who was killed by her husband.
Bobby McCauley murdered Roseanne McCauley and 2 of her kids. On Saturday in Clayton, people met to honor her and her 2 children. On Saturday, in front of the Buzz Westfall Justice Center in Clayton, people gathered to mourn the lives they say were taken too soon.
People held signs, chanted, and shared personal stories of survival and loss. They called for stronger protections for victims of domestic violence. They demanded that the justice system treat repeated abuse reports with the seriousness they deserve. Among the speakers was U.S. Representative Cori Bush, who condemned the violence and called for legislative reform.
Thank you all for giving me an opportunity to come and speak with you and share with you. I actually just got off the plane. My father told me this was happening, and so I just wanted to come and share with the family and with those right now that are suffering and hurting. We have to put focus in areas where there has not been real focus. And we know there has not been enough focus because it keeps happening. And so we have to do that work. And I am coming from, and you all know my story, I'm a survivor myself. And the only way I got out, this man standing right here in this Cori Bush shirt, my father, after almost 2 years and almost losing my life 3 times, my dad, I called him one day. I couldn't even talk to him. I didn't even want to talk to him. I was so ashamed about what I was going through, about what I was allowing. I was so hurt and broken. But one day I just picked up the phone at work and I called and I didn't say a word. And he didn't even know it was me. He just said, I'll be there to get you. And he gave me a time and I was ready with trash bags and I threw him out the door. And my dad called him and threw him in his van. And that was the end of that situation. Saved my life.
Rosie's mother also spoke, voicing her heartbreak and her belief that the system had let her daughter down. She pointed out that charges against Bobby had previously been downgraded to misdemeanors, removing the urgency to find and arrest him even after clear signs that he was a danger.
They saw exactly what had been done to her, and they charged it as some misdemeanor, assault 3 or something, which meant they could only put out a wanted, which means that they weren't actively looking for him. I mean, had he run across them at a traffic stop or something, they might have arrested him, but they didn't actively go out and find him.
Although sad, All Solutions President and CEO Michelle Sherrod says events like Saturdays are necessary to end domestic violence.
We want folks to understand you don't have to suffer in silence. You can get help, and we're bringing those resources to the table.
This wasn't an isolated incident. In fact, when Bobby's history came under the microscope, the findings were deeply disturbing. Court documents revealed that Bobby had been involved in multiple domestic violence cases over the years. As far back as 2008, women had filed restraining orders against him. One woman said he pointed a gun at her and her child. Another said he used his new girlfriend to intimidate her and her mother. In 2010, he was convicted of false imprisonment, essentially holding someone against their will. He was given a year of probation and an ankle monitor. That's it. No jail time. With each new revelation, a picture began to form. Bobby had been violent, manipulative, and dangerous for over a decade. Yet, he had slipped through the cracks of a justice system not equipped or perhaps not willing to stop him. And Rosie wasn't the only one who paid the price. Her story and the loss of her children serve as a grim reminder that domestic violence is not a private matter, it's a societal crisis. One that requires more than sympathy. It requires action. Today, people still talk about Rosie. About her bright spirit, her talent, and her strength. About the joy her children brought into the world. And about the warning signs that were missed over and over again. Could this have been prevented? Should the police have done more the night of March 5th when the neighbor reported Bobby's presence? Why wasn't Bobby arrested after Rosie's repeated calls for help? How can we better protect people who are trying to escape abusive relationships? We may never have all the answers. But we can honor Rosie by making sure her story sparks change. By listening more carefully, responding more urgently, and ensuring that survivors have real options and protection when they ask for help. This is not just the story of a mother and her children. It's a story about us, our responsibility to each other, and our duty to build a system that sees, hears, and acts before it's too late.
Let's begin this story with a shocking video. The footage shows 2 people. The first is Deputy John Durham, a 61-year-old veteran correctional officer. The second is an inmate whom Deputy Durham was assigned to transport to court for trial. Before we go any further, there's one important detail you should know. This wasn't an ordinary inmate. He was facing a capital murder charge, the most serious type of criminal case, making him a high-risk detainee. Yet, as you notice in the video, the 61-year-old deputy appears to be transporting him without the level of backup many people might expect. They reach the destination, the 61-year-old veteran opens the back door of the van, the capital murder detainee walks out, and that. Guys, the veteran deputy is on the ground. Now watch what happens next. The inmate steals the transport van and drives away. There are 2 or 3 major questions we'll answer as we break down this case. I wanted to start with this footage because it's the moment everyone talks about, but behind it is a deeply disturbing story that explains how it all led here. Why was a rapper being held on a capital murder charge? Why was a 61-year-old veteran correctional officer transporting someone accused of such a serious crime by himself?
Before speaking further on the subject, I want to make it clear that there is one person at fault here. Some have speculated the fault lies in understaffing. Some say it's defective equipment or even complacency. It wasn't understaffing that killed John Durham.
To answer those questions, let's go back to Indiana, where this story really begins. There, we meet 28-year-old Crystal Walton. Born on May 30th, 1995, she had no idea her life would become connected to one of the state's shocking criminal cases. Crystal grew up surrounded by the familiar streets and neighborhoods of her hometown, where family and friends watched her take her first steps, go to school, and discover her interests. As she became older, she carried those lessons into adulthood, determined to build a good life for herself. All her experiences would prepare her for a role at the heart of patient care. Crystal chose a job in healthcare. She worked as a radiology technician at Indiana University Health Methodist Hospital. That means she helped doctors take special medical images like X-rays so they could understand what was happening inside a patient's body. It was an important job, and it showed that Crystal cared about helping other people. Her choice of career reflected her desire to make a difference in the lives of others. Sadly, her life would be taken before she could fully fulfill that desire. Every day, Crystal balanced technical precision with human compassion, proving that her work was not just about images, but about people. She cared for her patients with steady patience and genuine empathy, often going beyond routine duties to ease their stress and make them feel at peace. Her colleagues described her as a calming presence in a demanding environment, someone consistently composed, dependable, and compassionate, no matter how intense the situation became. That reputation was evident by the number of colleagues who would gather at her vigil. Beyond her work, Crystal carried something even more important. She was also a mother. She had a 7-year-old daughter from a previous relationship. That little girl meant the world to her. Crystal tried her best to give her children love, safety, and a stable home. Tragically, her path would cross with a man who would change her life in a horrific way. In 2017, Crystal met and began a relationship with a man named Orlando Mitchell. Orlando was a 35-year-old man who, at first, seemed like the kind of partner many women would hope for. And from the outside, things may have looked normal. Or so everyone thought. They were spending time together, sharing meals, going places, and like many couples, they started building a life that included plans for the future. Friends and family saw them as a pair moving forward, and Crystal believed she was stepping into a new chapter of her life. If only they knew he was a ticking bomb waiting to explode. Orlando treated Crystal with care in the beginning. He was attentive, often checking on her, and he made her feel supported. He showed affection in small ways, and to those around them, he appeared to be a good boyfriend, someone who wanted to build a future with Crystal. But as we've seen in many cases, perpetrators often hide their true character behind a mask of tenderness. The facade of devotion can be convincing, yet beneath it lies the darker reality that would tragically change Crystal's life in ways she never imagined. By 2021, the couple had been together for about 4 years. During that time, Crystal and Orlando were expecting a baby together. In February 2021, Crystal had shared happy news that she was pregnant. It looked like a new chapter was beginning for them, one filled with hope and family. She imagined the joy of becoming a mother the second time. For those around her, it seemed like a moment of celebration, a time when her life was opening into something bright and promising. But appearances can be deceiving, because everything was not as happy as it seemed. Just a short time later, things between Crystal and Orlando began to fall apart. In March 2021, while Crystal was 4 months pregnant, she ran to her mother's house with her daughter and called the police. But what she told the dispatcher was chilling. She told them that Orlando had hurt her inside their home. She said he became angry and got physical with her. She was scared, especially because she was carrying their unborn child. Crystal also said that Orlando made very upsetting statements during the incident. She later left the home with her daughter and went to her mother's house, which was nearby. From there, she called for help. That day, tension erupted when Orlando spotted Crystal's ex, the father of her daughter, outside their home waiting to pick up his child. The sight sent Orlando into a rage. His anger quickly turned towards Crystal, and he lashed out with unsettling threats, warning her, "I'm going to mess around and kill you." Not only that, he also demanded she terminate the pregnancy she was carrying, and his fury escalated into violence. Orlando grabbed Crystal by the neck, forcing her backwards onto the bed, and began to strangle her. The attack unfolded in front of her 6-year-old daughter, who watched in horror. Desperate to save her mother, the child jumped onto Orlando's back, screaming to him to stop hurting my mommy. It was only at that moment, confronted by the child's cries and resistance, that Orlando finally let go of Crystal. After this, the situation became more serious. Orlando was charged with several serious crimes connected to that event. These included domestic battery, strangulation, intimidation, and unlawful restraint. These were not small problems. They were signs of a relationship that had become unsafe and dangerous. Even after these charges, the situation did not fully improve in the way many would hope, because here's the part that I will never understand. Orlando spent just 1 day in jail. A man who was charged with those serious crimes only got to spend 1 day in jail. For Crystal and her loved ones, this was deeply unsettling. It felt like the system had failed to protect her, allowing someone accused of violence to walk free almost immediately. Little did they know, this was only the beginning of a series of events that would shake the family. Orlando was given probation and counseling for a year and allowed limited contact with Crystal for childcare arrangements only. A court-ordered domestic violence program was also assigned. On paper, these measures were supposed to keep Crystal safe and help Orlando change his behavior, but in reality, they did not erase the danger Crystal felt or, sadly, what she would soon experience. Crystal tried to move forward with her life. She focused on her children and her job. In September 2021, she shared on Facebook on becoming a homeowner, which was a big and proud moment for her. However, just 15 hours later, she would welcome her baby boy. It was a moment filled with both joy and challenge. Joy because she welcomed her baby into the world, and challenge because Orlando was still part of her life, even after everything that had happened. But nothing prepared her for the horrifying things Orlando had planned for her. Orlando made posts online that seemed to send mixed messages about Crystal and their relationship. Sometimes he spoke about their child. Other times he made comments that suggested anger and conflict. It created a situation where things were still emotionally tense and unstable. But on August 6, 2022, things became even more frightening. Orlando had called Crystal saying he wanted to pick up their son a day earlier than the scheduled date. But when Crystal said no, he showed up at her home, forced himself in, despite the active no-contact order in place. he still came inside her home forcefully. Crystal threatened she would call the police. But instead of leaving, Orlando would make a chilling remark. He told her directly, "This will be the last time you call for someone." So he didn't leave. Instead of calling the police, Crystal called Orlando's mother, who calmed the situation. Not long after, Orlando left her home. After that incident, Crystal reported what happened to the authorities. Not long after, Orlando sent her a message that sounded like a warning. In it, he told her she needed to be reasonable, or she could lose everything, including her home, her job, and even her child. These were deeply frightening words for a mother trying to protect her family. Crystal also began taking legal steps to protect herself and her child. She filed for child support and continued dealing with court matters involving custody and parenting time. These situations often require court dates, paperwork, and stressful communication between parents. But in this case, it was also tied to growing fear and conflict. By late August 2022, there was also a warrant out for Orlando's arrest because he had violated the rules set by the court. Another legal charge was later added, including invasion of privacy and intimidation related to his actions. At this point, police were aware of the situation and there were legal orders in place. But nothing prepared Crystal for the violence that was about to take her from her children. On September 16, 2022, that morning, Crystal did what she often did as a mother. She got her children ready for the day and drove them to a daycare center in Indianapolis called Charity Childcare. It was just a normal stop in her morning routine. She parked, walked her children inside, and made sure they were safe. After dropping her children off, Crystal walked back outside toward her car. But Crystal did not know that someone was already there. Orlando Mitchell was waiting nearby in the parking area. He had positioned himself before she arrived. As Crystal walked back from the daycare building toward her car, he moved toward her. And then the situation turned into a deadly crime. He approached her in the parking lot. At that moment, everything escalated very quickly. Crystal had no time to fully react or escape the danger she was suddenly facing right outside the daycare where she had just left her children. Orlando raised a rifle and fired multiple shots at her in the parking lot. Crystal Walton was shot outside the daycare center that morning. That was the moment everything changed. Right after the shots were fired in the parking lot, everything became chaotic. People nearby heard the loud noise and realized something terrible had happened. Some froze in fear, others ran to get help. Someone quickly called 911. They told the emergency workers that a woman had been shot outside the daycare center in Indianapolis. The call was urgent. Police and medical teams rushed to the scene as fast as they could. When police and emergency services arrived, they tried to help Crystal immediately. They did everything they could, but Crystal's injuries were too serious. She was later pronounced dead at the scene.
September 2022, Mitchell ambushed Walton, shooting her in the face after she dropped off her two kids at Charity Childcare on West 10th Street in Hawville. Mitchell ignored the protective order Walton had in place for an alleged strangling incident in March 2021, when Walton was pregnant with their son.
Crystal's family would later learn the devastating news that she would not be coming home. Her children had gone into daycare that morning with a mother, but they would never see her again. The person police were looking for was Orlando Mitchell. Orlando Mitchell, the father of Crystal's youngest child. After the shooting, he ran away from the daycare area before officers could stop him. According to court records, Mitchell's mother had rushed to the daycare after the shooting. She told investigators she hadn't spoken to her son Orlando in weeks, explaining that he had previously threatened Crystal's life and even talked about ending his own. Not only that, she recalled him saying that if he couldn't remain part of his son's world, then Crystal wouldn't be allowed to be either. After sharing those disturbing details, she gave officers a description of his vehicle, a crucial lead that would soon guide their search. But he also shared something chilling. The tipster told police that the man connected to the vehicle had admitted to killing his girlfriend near 10th and Holmes. However, what happened next proved even more dangerous. Just hours later, that information pointed police towards a chilling discovery. Around 10:20 a.m. the same morning, a 911 call came in from a different part of the city.
Someone had spotted the man matching the description. Police moved fast toward that location. When officers found him, he was inside his vehicle. They ordered him to get out and put down his weapon. The situation became tense very quickly. Instead of following instructions, he refused to cooperate. Officers saw that he was still armed, and they feared for their safety. Because of that danger, police fired shots and hit him in the leg. He was injured but survived. Officers then moved in carefully and took control of the situation. Orlando was loaded into a stretcher and into the back of the ambulance. However, body cam audio captured a disturbing admission from Orlando. Without hesitation and with no sign of remorse, he confessed to shooting Crystal. It was clear the attack had been deliberate and calculated. He was taken to a hospital where he was treated before finally being arrested and taken into custody. After his arrest, police began putting together the full story. They connected the morning shooting to earlier reports and warnings involving Crystal and Orlando. They also learned that there had already been serious problems in their relationship before this day. So, on July 10th, 2023, nearly a year after Crystal's death, while awaiting trial, Orlando was being held at the Marion County Jail. A deputy was assigned to take him to a routine medical visit. That deputy was John Durham. At around 9:03 a.m., security footage inside Marion County captures a chilling moment. Deputy John Durham, the 61-year-old veteran correctional officer, is preparing to transport a capital murder detainee to Ashkenazi Hospital for a medical checkup. But as you watch the video, something stands out immediately. This isn't any inmate. He's facing the most serious charge in the system, yet the deputy appears to be handling the transport alone, without the proper backup or restraints that are standard for high-risk detainees. Normally, procedures require multiple officers, reinforced security measures, and strict oversight when moving someone accused of capital murder. But here, it's just one veteran deputy opening the van door, trusting the process. However, what Orlando did next would leave everyone who watched the video questioning his sanity. Orlando was chained, handcuffed, and shackled, standard procedure. At around 9:06 a.m., both men can be seen driving out of the county in a white van. Nearly 2 hours later, at around 10:56 a.m., Orlando finishes his medical appointment, and they both leave the hospital together. But what many didn't know was Orlando had made a crazy plan in his head on the drive back to the correctional facility, and he was about to carry it out. When they returned, Deputy Durham opened the van door. Orlando slipped out of one handcuff and wrapped the chain around the deputy's neck. A violent fight broke out. Unfortunately, no other deputies were there at the time. Even though policy required 2 officers for transporting murder suspects, that rule wasn't followed. Orlando was left alone with one deputy, and for 2 long minutes, no help came, no backup, no safety checks. A few seconds later, an officer walked into the Sallyport and noticed the deputy on the ground and Orlando driving away in the transport van. He called for help, but it was already too late. However, Orlando's escape didn't last long. After being chased for a few minutes, he soon crashed into a utility pole nearby. Officers quickly caught him and brought him back into custody. But the damage was done. Another life was gone. The public's trust in the system, already shaken by Crystal's case, was hit again. Deputy John Durham had served with the Marion County Sheriff's Office for nearly 40 years. He was a father of 4. A husband, and a respected officer from a law enforcement family. His death, like Crystal's, could have been prevented, and just like hers, it left people asking, how could this happen? Why was a violent man given such a chance, and why weren't the rules followed to protect those who had to guard him? Sheriff Kerry Forrestal admitted the department had failed. He said staffing shortages and mistakes inside the office played a role in breaking protocol. Because of this, disciplinary steps were taken. 4 deputies were punished, with 2 losing rank for their part in the oversight. The case raised hard questions about how the department worked and whether more could have been done to stop the danger.
But in the end, the sheriff made one point clear. It wasn't staffing that killed Deputy Durham. It wasn't faulty equipment. It was Orlando Mitchell.
I want to make it clear that there is one person at fault here. Some have speculated the fault lies in understaffing. Some say it's defective equipment or even complacency. It wasn't understaffing that killed John Durham. It was not faulty equipment that killed him, nor was it complacency. It was Orlando Mitchell.
By the time Orlando faced trial for Crystal's murder in early 2024, the community already knew what kind of a man he was and what he was capable of, and the proof against him was strong. In court, surveillance footage from the daycare was played. It showed Orlando hiding behind a pole, watching Crystal drop off her children. Then came the ambush. It took just over an hour for the jury to convict him. Orlando Mitchell was found guilty of murder and invasion of privacy. Prosecutors called it a planned execution carried out by a man who refused to take responsibility. They reminded the court that Crystal had tried everything to protect herself: restraining orders, police reports, and witness accounts. Yet she was still hunted and killed by someone the system failed to stop again and again. In the days after the shooting, family, friends, co-workers, and people from across Indianapolis came together for a vigil to honor Crystal Walton. They brought flowers, candles, photos, and prayers. There were tears, hugs, and long silences, none of it enough to explain the pain of what had happened.
Earlier tonight, family and friends held a vigil for Crystal Walton, who was shot and killed Friday while dropping her children off at Charity Care's daycare center on the west side. Police say the alleged killer had threatened her life before finally ending it on Friday. Well, WRTV's Meredith Hackler was at the vigil.
We love you, Crystal!
Crystal Walton's young daughter was among dozens of friends, family, and co-workers who all came together on Sunday to honor her life.
The reason Crystal was a hero was because this had to happen in order to prevent some of you from going through the same exact thing.
Come on, Dad. Come on, Dad.
Domestic violence is real.
Yes, sir.
You see it over and over again in the news, and it just keeps happening. I don't know what the answer is, but what we're doing is not working. So I hope that this will shed some light on a very dark topic.
And while all Walton's family and friends want people to remember her for how great of a person she was,
she's accountable, she's confident, she's intelligent, she's black, she's smart, and she is well loved by all of us.
They also want to use her tragic death to remind people in domestic violence situations that there's help out there.
If you have friends, if you have anybody who is going through anything like this, you need to get them some help immediately.
Working for you in Indianapolis.
I love my mom. She was the best mom ever.
Crystal was remembered not only for the violence she faced, but for the strength she showed every single day. She poured everything into caring for her children, and when the abuse became too heavy, she tried to protect them the only way she knew, by leaving, but the danger followed her. This was more than a tragedy. It was a failure of the justice system, of intervention measures, and of the protections meant to shield victims from repeat abusers. Crystal's story was not the only one. Every year, thousands of people, mostly women, try to leave abusive relationships. Many face threats, stalking, and violence. Some make it out alive, but others sadly don't. Behind each case is a person who wanted safety, who wanted peace, but instead faced danger from someone they once trusted. Too often, society has blamed victims for staying. People ask, why didn't she leave, as if leaving is simple. But leaving is often the most dangerous step. Abusers may become more violent when they realize they are losing control. The justice system, which is supposed to protect survivors, sometimes allows abusers to walk free or face punishments that do not match the seriousness of their crimes. This leaves survivors exposed, even after they have done everything right. But Crystal left. She did everything survivors are told to do. She followed the advice. She tried to protect herself, and she built a new life. And still, she was killed. Her story shows that the problem is not with the victims. It is with the systems and the society that too often fails to keep them safe. Change should never wait until a murder happens. My condolences go out to the family and friends of Crystal Walton. May you find peace in the memories you have of her.